restore immigrants to a safe haven. The Israeli factory worker, the Jewish policeman on the road, the soldier at his post, as if they had always been there. But the state of Israel was declared against the will of many. It happened in this house, the Tel Aviv Museum on Rothschild Boulevard, on May 14, 1948. The story of the Jewish Defense Force, without which the state could not be established and cannot continue to exist, begins in 1907. The Jews in what was then Palestine totaled about 70,000 persons at the time, intermingled with about 500,000 Arabs. In a small room in Yaffo, the secret organization Bar Giora is set up. Its aim, to establish a Jewish force to protect the Moshavot in the Galilee. But there is another purpose, distant, utopian, which became the organization's motto: in blood and fire Judah fell, in blood and fire Judah shall arise. From that seed arises the HaShomer organization in 1909. About 80 young people from the Galilee, Samaria, and Judea join up to protect the settlements and fields. They ride horses, carry their ammunition in bandoliers across their chests, and use a hunting rifle. World War I breaks out. Thousands of Jews from Palestine volunteer for service in the British Army, and in 1915, the Jewish Legion is established. Their ambition to set up a Jewish army, the first after 2,000 years, to fight the distant Germans as well as their allies, the Turks, who rule the country at this time. But the British, who at the end of the war would receive a mandate to govern Palestine, decide on a balanced policy between the two peoples living in the country. They published the Balfour Declaration, declaring the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. The declaration of the national home generated an enormous awakening in the Zionist movement, and Jews from around the world begin immigrating to Israel and settling in the country. The local Arabs, who are concerned at losing their majority, revolt. Joseph Trubaldor, one of the commanders of the Jewish Zion Mule Driver Corps, goes up to Tel Hai to organize HaShomer to defend the Galilee. On March 1st, 1920, the 11th of Adar, 5680, Tel Hai is attacked. Although its defenders hold on, 8 of them fall in the battle, Trubaldor among them. The roaring lion standing over their grave reminds later generations of their legacy of bravery. Tel Hai proves that a few horses and some good hunting rifles may be sufficient to protect a single position, but are certainly not enough against a general Arab uprising. Thus, on May 15, 1920, in the yard of Kvutzat Kinneret, a historic decision is made. Tiny HaShomer is dismantled, and a large national military organization is established, the Haganah. The founders of the Haganah foresaw the future well. 1 year later, in May 1921, bloody riots break out in Petah Tikva, Rehovot, Hadera, and Jaffa. The number of rifles in the possession of the defenders is very small, and many of them hold only iron bars and wooden sticks. The attacks are repelled, but at the heavy price of dozens of casualties. The obvious conclusion is, an organization is not enough. Training, defense preparations, and first and foremost weapons are also needed. The 1929 riots take place all over the country, but the Haganah is ready. Wherever Jews have organized themselves in self-defense, in Jaffa, Jerusalem, Haifa, the villages of the Jezreel Valley and the Galilee, the Moshavot in the south, they succeed in repelling the attackers. In the old towns and cities, Hebron, Safat, Moza, there are massacres, and dozens of the undefended inhabitants are murdered. The impressive resistance demonstrated by the Haganah instills confidence in the present and faith in the future. Immigrants come in, land is purchased, settlements are set up. The decisive facts established on the ground are also the fuel that ignite the next conflagration, the Arab Revolt, which we know as the events of 1936 and 39. The gangs fight both Jews and British alike, setting ambushes and laying mines on the roads, attacking the police stations, army bases, and government facilities. The common enemy spawns a joint struggle. Within the British police force, a Jewish unit is formed, the Notrim. About 3,000 Haganah members in uniform, armed with rifles, engage in guarding the fields and escorting and protecting workers. For the first time, the Jewish population has an open, legal military organization. Far from British eyes, the weapons of the Notrim serve to train the fighters of the secret illegal military organization, the Haganah. The character of the Arab terror dictates to the Haganah a new security concept. The mobile unit is set up, an elite unit which, like the Sayarot of today, moves on foot, by car, or on horseback, on patrols, ambushes, and raids. The mobile unit gives rise to the field companies, a motorized national force riding pickups and armored trucks, commanded by the most senior security man in the Jewish population, Yitzhak Sadeh. Sadeh believes that the best defense is offense, and he decides to go outside the fence. No more passive waiting in fortified positions, but taking preemptive action in the open field or at the enemy's rear. The special operations usually take place in the dark of night, a revolutionary move initially introduced by the Special Night Squadrons, led by a British officer, Captain Charles Ord Wingate. The field companies provide the crucial protective shield for an enormous settlement campaign known as Homa Umigdal, Stockade and Tower, which takes place in the midst of the hostilities. More than 40 kibbutzim and moshavim, from Negba and Kfar Menahem in the Negev to Dan, Daphna, and Hanita in the Galilee, are set up in the heart of hostile Arab regions to establish borders and to provide securities. The field companies also provide security for erecting the fence along the northern border, the aim of which is to prevent infiltrators coming in from Lebanon and Syria. But perseverance and courage get results, leading the way to a decisive victory. Hostilities die down. When the hostilities ended, this force is dismantled, and regional units are established, field forces, serving as reserves for the Haganah for emergency situations whenever they arise. In the field, the special squads were now active, small select units designed to fight terror and perform special operations. 1939, a fateful year. The British government surrenders to Arab pressure and publishes the White Paper, stopping immigration and settlement almost totally. Britain is abandoning the Jewish community. Professor Chaim Weizmann, president of the Zionist organization, accuses Britain and warns her of the results. History will judge the intentions of Great Britain concerning our small country. David Ben-Gurion, chairman of the board of the Jewish Agency, states that the new policy is illegal and declares war on the White Paper. But war comes from another direction. On September 3rd, Nazi Germany invades Poland and World War II breaks out. The Jewish population is torn in its attitude to Britain, which is fighting both Germany and the Jews. Ben-Gurion defines the complex formula. We must assist the British Army as if there were no White Paper, and fight the White Paper as if there were no war. The World War knocks on the doors of Palestine. Rommel's Africa Corps is galloping in the direction of Egypt. German advanced troops reach Syria and Lebanon. The danger is near and tangible. Around us, the storm rages. Worried about the approaching Germans, the British prepare to retreat from Palestine. In government ministries, papers are burned. Enemy planes attack Palestine. One of them is brought down over Haifa by Haganah gunners. Tel Aviv has no air defense and is bombed twice. There are more than 100 casualties. On May 15, 1941, the Haganah sets up the Palmach. 6 squadrons are recruited under the command of Yitzhak Sadeh. Their training includes the use of weapons, patrols, and land and sea sabotage operations aimed at immediate entry into battle. The best young people enroll for this national effort and enter the Palmach, fulfilling the words of its anthem. Every good young man to arms, every young man on guard. Towards the end of 1942, Rommel's forces are stopped in the western desert, and the threat from the north also recedes. The sword hanging over our head is removed. Voices are heard among the leaders of the Jewish population calling to reduce the military forces due to the heavy financial burden. The kibbutzim come to the rescue. They take in the Palmach units, provide them with accommodation, food, and clothing, and in return, the fighters work on the farms half the month, and the other half they train as scouts, pilots, seamen, and Arab impersonators. In Europe, the war continues to rage. Thousands of Haganah members volunteer to the ranks of the British Army, and in 1944, the Jewish Fighting Brigade is established, better known as the Brigada. The uniforms are British, the language Hebrew, the flag and emblem Jewish. Bit by bit, the unbelievable information filters in about the Holocaust. The small Jewish population of Palestine are unable to help, but neither could they just stand aside. In cooperation with British intelligence, a paratroop unit is set up. The fighters volunteer to parachute into the conquered European countries, to gather information, make radio contact, and mainly, to get in touch with those Jews that have not yet been sent to the extermination camps and organize them. 37 male and female paratroopers manage to infiltrate behind the lines. Hannah Senish lands in Hungary, where she was born, but is caught by the Germans and executed, together with another 6 of her Jewish paratroop colleagues. World War II ends. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish Holocaust refugees seeking safe asylum find the gates of Palestine locked by order of the White Paper. The Haganah, with the help of the Aliyah Bet, the Organization for Illegal Immigration, together with the Palyam, the Marine arm of the Palmach, commence a comprehensive campaign of illegal immigration, Ha'apala. About 100,000 Jews attempt to break the British blockade and immigrate to Palestine, while thousands of soldiers, ships, and planes try to prevent their fragile boats from entering Palestine. Many of the Mapilim are captured and sent to camps in Cyprus. Nevertheless, the masses trying to reach their homeland redefine the objective. Now not only Jewish immigration, but also a Jewish state. The means are also redefined. The radar station, the battleships and expulsion boats obstructing the immigration are blown up. Immigrants incarcerated in the detention camps at Atlit are forcibly released. Police stations and army bases are attacked. In one night, the night of the trains, the Palmach fighters sabotage 153 sites on the National Railroad Network. And on the night of the bridges, in a daring and complex operation, they destroy 10 road and train bridges along the Jordanian and Lebanese borders. At the end of Yom Kippur, October 6, 1946, 11 new settlements are set up in the south of the country. This ambitious project is aimed at frustrating the Anglo-American division plan of Palestine, which leaves the Negev out of bounds for Jews. The Haganah believes that the plow will determine the borders. These operations require a great deal of arms. Some of them are purchased abroad in acquisition operations. Some are stolen from the British. But the majority are manufactured at about 40 underground plants operated by the Haganah military industry, known as TAS. The illegal weapons are hidden from the searching eyes of the British in hiding places known as slicks. On the top of a hill, in the heart of a green grove in the abandoned houses of the village of Juwara, the Haganah sets up a secret base as its main officer training camp. There the command staff of the War of Independence train and take shape. All the platoon and company commanders, the majority of the battalion and brigade commanders, as well as 9 future chiefs of staff who would lead Israel in war. In July 1947, a ship sets out for Palestine with 4,554 illegal immigrants on board. Its name is the Exodus. The British catch the ship and plan to deport the refugees to displaced persons camps in Germany where they came from. The scene is incredible, like a cruel attempt to turn the clock back. The struggle of the Holocaust survivors striving to reach their historic homeland and establish a state of their own is suddenly perceived as logical and just in the eyes of the majority of the world.
Egypt, now, Soviet Union, Yes. United Kingdom and Spain. United States. Yes.
The resolution of the Dutch Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstained.
November 29, 1947. The UN Assembly resolves on the end of the British mandate in Palestine and the division of the land west of the Jordan into two states, Arab and Jewish. Hope nurtured in the heart for 2,000 years erupts in one night. The national homeland will be a state, although small and without Jerusalem, which will be governed by the UN, but independent and ours. The Arabs of Palestine, on the other hand, reject any kind of division, and they attempt to achieve by force their aspiration for a state from the Jordan to the sea. The very next morning, the gangs attack two buses headed for Jerusalem, killing 6 Jews. The Great War breaks out. When it ends 18 months later, it will be called the War of Independence. At this fateful moment, nobody can foresee its amazing result. The first months of the war are full of failures, snipings, attacks, and car bombs inside the cities, siege and shootings at solitary settlements, ambushes and explosive charges on the roads. The Haganah forces invest the majority of their effort in maintaining the links between the isolated settlements, especially besieged Jerusalem. Not all of them hold out. Convoys of vehicles, only some of which are armored, bear food, equipment, medicine, and arms to Jerusalem. Not all will reach their destination. The British mandate is about to expire. The Arab armies wait for the evacuation of His Majesty's forces in order to overrun Palestine and subdue the Jewish population. At this critical point, with everything hanging by a thread, David Ben-Gurion makes his greatest decision. On May 14, 1948, the 28th anniversary of the establishment of the Haganah, the Interim National Council and Ben-Gurion declare the establishment of the State of Israel. The very next day, while the last of the British soldiers are leaving the country, 5 Arab armies invade the infant state of Israel. The hand extended in peace is greeted by war. The Haganah throws all its forces into the battle, headed by 3 Palmach brigades, Iftach against the Syrian and Lebanese army, the Negev brigade against the entire Egyptian army, and in the heart of the country, against the Jordanian legions besieging Jerusalem, the Har El brigade, commanded by Yitzhak Rabin. The Haganah's field forces also joined the battle. Golani, Carmeli, Alexandroni, Kiryati, Givati, Etzioni, the motorized and armored corps. The Palyam becomes the Marine Service. The Palmach Flying Corps becomes the Air Service. All over Europe, tens of thousands of Holocaust survivors volunteered to join the ranks of the Haganah as part of the foreign recruits, Gahal. Jewish volunteers from abroad, the Machal, the majority of whom are war veterans, rush over here to assist. The war fought by the Jewish state is also fought by the Jewish people. On June 1st, 2 weeks after the declaration of the state, David Ben-Gurion, now Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, publishes the order of the day establishing the Israeli Defense Forces. From now on, it is no longer a series of skirmishes between rural gangs and underground organizations, but an overall war between regular state armies. The entire hope of the Zionist vision to be a free people in our country stands on the young shoulders of about 30,000 fighting men and women, the majority of which are graduates of the Haganah. The War of Independence lasts until March 1949. When it ends, the borders of the state stretch from Tel Hai in the Galilee via Jerusalem and the Negev to Eilat on the shores of the Red Sea. 6,000 young men and women, 1% of the population of the infant state, die in this war for our existence. They are the silver platter on which the Jewish state is handed to the Jewish people. In 1920, in the yard of Kvutzat Kinneret, the Haganah organization raised the sword and the olive branch for the security and welfare of the people of Israel returning to its country. Under the same symbol, the Israeli Defense Forces continue today to fulfill its as yet unfinished task, the aspiration for security, the desire for peace.